Everybody for being here. It's the Business 200 panel, the second option this semester. And I'm delighted to have you here. I feel like we're on a TV show, like a little talk show.
Good morning.
Good morning, yes. Very good. So what we're going to do is, well, first of all, I'm going to have our guest introduce himself to you in a moment, but we're just going to have a casual conversation that you all are going to be listening in on about his work with his nonprofit, which actually I think is one of, well, I have a slight bias, but I think one of the coolest nonprofits around, just in terms of your history and the growth. I mean, the phenomenal growth. So I'm excited to have students hear about that because you were them when you started this. So I'm very excited to have them here to hear about this. And then we'll have time at the end for some questions. The objective of tonight is to try to expose you to two ideas. One is that your business skills are needed in nonprofits, and that everything you're learning in your business classes actually opens a career avenue for you in nonprofits. And then the second is to really dispel some of the myths or explore some of the myths about what it means to work in nonprofits, what that life is like. Can you pay rent, for instance? Can you eat? Can you pay to drive a car? Those sorts of things. So we'll talk about a little bit about that. But just to open up, both looking at what business aspects are involved in running nonprofits and also those career options. Because Business 200 is really the only class in your curriculum in the College of Business where we specifically talk about nonprofits. Most of your textbooks don't even reference nonprofits. There's an ongoing discussion about whether nonprofits are even businesses, and yes, they are. So this is our one opportunity to have you really look at that. So, Josh, who are you? What do you do? Tell us your background. How'd you get here?
Can do.
All
right. Should I talk to you or the audience? What works best for you, Barb?
I think either way.
Either way, I might alternate. Is that all right, everybody? Awesome.
Would it be better if I sat up there?
No,
and then
get the line of sight?
Yeah.
That's right. I'll move back and forth.
Okay, good.
So my name is Josh Reimnitz. I am 27 years old. I graduated from North Dakota State University in Fargo in 2008. And I moved to Atlanta. I taught fourth grade there in an urban elementary school. And it was through the Teach for America program. And so after 2 years of teaching in Atlanta, I moved up to Minneapolis, where I took a job with Students Today, Leaders Forever, and that's the nonprofit I currently help run. And I'll tell you a little bit more about our leadership structure, but we have 3 co-executive directors, and I get to serve as one of those co-EDs. And it's a 6-year term, so we run like the Senate. One person rotates out every 2 years, but you sign on for a 6-year term. So I'm halfway through my commitment with a leadership role there. And then last year, almost a year ago, I got elected to the Minneapolis School Board. And so I'll serve a 4-year term with that as well.
I'd forgotten about that.
Yeah.
The youngest member, is that correct?
Currently, yes. So I'm about 17 years younger than most of the other folks there, but it's still a lot of fun. And so I'd say those are my 2 primary roles, and that's kind of where I sit today. So I'm really happy to be here.
What was your undergraduate major?
Mass communication and speech communication with a minor in political science.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so kind of shifted right out of college.
What did you think you were going to grow up to become?
So that's tough to answer. One is either a late night show host or game show host.
Here we go.
In more reality, it was a journalist of some kind.
Okay.
So I'd interned with a television station. I had my own radio show, did some of that stuff as well. But as I neared graduation, I just wasn't feeling it as much. And so my secondary option would have been education if I didn't pick mass communication as a major, and Teach for America as a way to get back into that.
Sidebar.
Yeah.
Let's stay with Teach for America for a minute, just because it's so interesting. So any student, regardless of major, can go do Teach for America for a year.
Sure.
It's really competitive.
You could do Teach for America.
Right, you don't have to be young.
Mm-hmm.
But
that's not your disqualifier.
Right. Actually, I do think about it because I've had several students from Business 200 go on to do Teach for America, and it's really competitive, and they've had phenomenal experiences. And then my stepson, but son, whatever, did like the Minneapolis equivalent of Teach for America, the Twin Cities equivalent, and he has a degree from here in actuarial science, and and he just wanted to get back for a year. And so it was a whole change for him.
Yeah.
But did you think about staying as a teacher?
So what I realize is that my skill set's a little bit different within a teacher. I'm probably more of an administrator side of things. So I taught for my 2 years and had good growth with my students, but it wasn't long-term sustainable. So I actually applied for other jobs within TFA.
Oh,
and so
okay.
I still would have pursued a nonprofit path. One would have been training educators, and the other would have been recruiting students to join the Corps.
Oh, okay.
But STLF moved a little faster, and I had gone through it as a student, and so that drew me in.
Wow, okay.
Mhm. Yeah.
So definitely an option to think about. Post-graduation, Teach for America. You do have to apply early, and it's competitive.
Yeah.
And it's phenomenal experience, I think.
Yeah, I think TFA has a deadline coming up for any seniors. It might be the 3rd or 4th. They usually go 5.
Right.
But then if you're younger than seniors, you still have a good year before you need to apply.
So something to think about. Okay, so that advertisement was brought to you by Teach for America. Now, back to STLF. So you went on an STLF trip?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
tell folks what that is. I think I want to do a TV show now.
Yeah? All right.
Yeah, I kind of
all right.
like this.
Tell
Yeah.
folks at
Forget
home.
about it, you guys. This is really kind of fun, yeah. What is STLF? How did you get involved? So
For
you're just
sure.
like sitting around your residence hall, your apartment, what?
Yeah, so what happens is, so some of the founders, so I'm not one of the founders, I came on the 2nd year, but there were students ages 17 to 19, they were 2 weeks into their freshman year, sitting around in the dorm room, having some ramen noodles, some Easy Mac. It's like 3 in the morning, and they asked the question, wouldn't it be awesome if? And they started finishing that question stem with, wouldn't it be awesome if young people could change the world? Wouldn't it be awesome if young people were seen as people who could make a substantial difference in how society operates? And over time, they ended up coming up with the idea of a Pay It Forward tour. And that materialized into being a spring break trip for college students. And they were the ones who were going to lead it. And so again, their ages 17 to 19, and they're taking students across the country for 9 days, staying in different places, sleeping on the floor, volunteering, and then they ended up, for the first time, in D.C. And so you mix in some tourism throughout the way, you get to really get to know yourself, you get to know others very well. We provide a space for kind of reflection and that time, a space for questions that we don't normally have in conversation. And so it ended up being a pretty personally transformational trip for these students. And so after that first year, what happened was someone came back, a friend of mine from high school, and I was a senior in high school at the time, and she said, Josh, this is for you. You have to do this. And so when I went to college, like I said, in Fargo, I drove down with a couple others to Minneapolis. I went on a trip out of the U of M, and just it was amazing. I met 40 really incredible individuals who I still stay in contact with today, and with a couple others, we started it at NDSU in Fargo. And so that was the 3rd chapter of STLF that existed, and I got to lead a bus, which is a totally new experience because there you're facilitating activities with your peers, and so that builds some incredible skills for what you'll need in almost any job. Mm-hmm. You're making cold calls and doing logistical planning. You are troubleshooting when things inevitably go wrong and not to plan. You're recruiting students, you're building marketing materials, so you're branding it as well, and then and you're working within a team the whole time. So all of our buses are led by college students, a group of college students, and that even includes our high school and our middle school programs that we now have. So it's a pretty tangible leadership experience that when in my interview for Teach for America, in fact, they asked me a bunch of questions. Tell me a time you had to solve a problem. Well, it's when my bus got broken into and everybody's stuff got stolen. Really crappy. And then tell me about a time you had to work within a team. Well, it's when I had 3 other core leaders that I was working with to facilitate this trip, where we're traveling across the country, managing a budget of $15,000. There's another thing that you get to work on as a student. So it ended up being a very, very tangible, meaningful leadership experience for me, as well as a chance to build some pretty deep relationships that I don't normally ask the questions about, which I think a lot of upper Midwesterners fall into as well.
Interesting. So that was 2005
when I went on the trip.
Okay.
Yep.
So it started as one bus from University of Minnesota.
Correct.
And then you guys became the 3rd chapter. Who is chapter number 2?
UND.
Okay.
Yep.
And then you're the 3rd chapter. And how many chapters now?
Now we're at 30 college chapters, and then we have high school programs. We have several dozen high school programs. So we run out of 14 states right now. We've volunteered in 48. Alaska and Hawaii have eluded us so far. We're going to get there.
The bus. You got to get that bus.
And then we actually have camps and then adult programs. So actually this year, I went on, I've got it here, both the mic, I'll keep it on, but went on our first ever Glory Days cruise. So this is one of our programs for adults, actually, where we got on a cruise ship and volunteered in different ports in the Bahamas. And it was really, really awesome. Because you took it outside the tourism zone and you got to go deep into the islands and actually meet some of the people and do some good, and you're on a cruise, so it's kind of fun.
Not bad. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I think I might know what I'm doing.
All right.
What have been some of the management issues with that growth? I mean, we're talking about a decade, and it's exploded.
For sure.
I remember the first high school group you guys did.
Yeah.
And then, and quite frankly, I didn't know you were in middle schools now.
Yeah.
And I certainly didn't know you were working with the boomers. Mm-hmm. How do you manage that growth?
Yeah.
Talk to me as a manager.
Well, it's been different depending on which stage you're at, right? So the first 3 years of our organization, it was all student-led. So we weren't a nonprofit. It was just simply student groups. Because remember, they were freshmen in college when they started it. And that's how they were managing multiple chapters of an organization when they still had their classes, their sororities, whatever else they were in on top of it. And so first step was incorporating as a nonprofit. Then they had to decide, actually it was deciding whether or not to, because they had to choose, they hired themselves. And did they have the money to do so? Would they be able to fundraise? Would they be able to sustain a living? And for the first year, they made $20,000, which is, I think if they could have done it differently, they would have.
Right. It doesn't pay a lot of rent for a group of people, right?
Little Caesars and ramen noodles were still the staples. And so that was one big management decision. And then the next was hiring staff members. And so the constant is chicken or egg type of thing, right? So we're currently at a stage where I think we're ready to explode again in growth. So we started off, it was 1 bus, 4 buses, 8 buses. Then all of a sudden we're in the 20s, and it's growing pretty fast in terms of percentage growth. And it's leveled off where we're still growing, but it's not quite as fast. And so what we're doing is we're currently in the midst of a national expansion plan, or kind of enacting a national expansion plan. Still good. And so essentially what we need to decide is, 1, are we going to put our resources towards fundraising to build the staff capacity to hire the staff we need, or are we just going to try and ride through that and work up until we get, so the programs also provide revenue for us because we have a mixed revenue model.
Okay.
And so finding that balance of having the necessary resources to grow, and where you put your resources, kind of where you're banking on it, which can happen in any business, right? Where do you invest?
Right. I know at one point I was the Ramsey County coordinator for fundraising for the American Cancer Society. And one of the issues that they ran into is, where does their money, there's lots of ways they can spend their money. Yep. We can educate people so that we prevent cancer. We could do research to treat it. Or should we be doing research or treatment? And so there were really 3 different pools really, pools to put those monies into. How do you, what process do you use to make those decisions? Are you voting? Talk about your unique management structure.
Sure, yeah. So with the 3 EDs, it all comes down to discussion, and same with this is up and down the organization. So when you're making decisions for a bus, the hardest decision we find is like what T-shirt design it's going to be or what color it's going to be. And so that gets the most contentious, oddly enough. But that runs all the way through the organization, and so it becomes a conversation. We don't vote. If we have a sort of line, if it's something you might not agree with, but if something you can't live with, we won't do it. So you might not be totally comfortable, but that's okay in some situations because we need to move forward as an organization. But it's talking through, and it's persuasion, it's debate. And so when you have multiple EDs, and we represent kind of different departments of an organization. So my role is, I'm a co-executive director, but I'm also the director of development, which includes communication and fundraising. And then we have a director of finance and operations, and we have a director of HR and programs. And so we all kind of come at it with our different lenses. Which becomes very beneficial because you'll also find us arguing for kind of those different items, which each of us might not think of within the organization. But what's nice about the model is that you're always thinking about the whole first and then moving into your specific sort of department. So in those types of decisions, it's really sitting down and hashing it out. We'll take all day offsites, and we'll just come in our sweatpants and throw something in the microwave, have some popcorn, and we'll just sit there and hash it out. And not every nonprofit works like that. In fact, very few do. But that's been our model. And a quick side story: there's an organization that started at the same time as us in Australia. Actually, very similar mission. Whenever their founder and ED would come up, she would come to meetings with us, and just because we were going through similar issues. And she actually decided to move on to a different part of her career, and the board voted to shut the organization down because they didn't know how they would ever replace her. And so what we've seen viable about our model is that we've been able to build sustainability in.
Right.
And instead of having our 3 or 4 extraordinary founders build the roles in themselves, build all the connections and everything that comes with it, we've built it into the organization. So it becomes more sustainable and more people can fill that role.
Because I was actually concerned about that in the beginning.
Yeah.
When St. Thomas joined you all, I became the advisor for STLF at St. Thomas. So right from the very beginning, this group, I was hearing about this group, and somebody has to sign the club sheet. All right, whatever, I'll do it. And then, then I became really interested. And then Jenna came to work with you guys, who I knew really well, a student here. And so I was thinking, because my doctoral work is in management, from a management perspective, how are you going to sustain? I mean, eventually the founders were going to grow up.
Yeah.
And can you keep that energy, or how could you bring new people in and keep the spirit going? And I love every 2 years there's some turnover at the top, but that's planned for, it's orchestrated that way. I think that really works very well.
Well, and to speak to that, I wouldn't get hired as an executive director in any organization at 24, right? I mean, so that provides an opportunity for me to come in. And so now by the time I'm 30, I have 6 years of ED experience that I can leverage to make a difference elsewhere.
Yeah.
And at the same time, with that transition every 2 years, it provides us a regular time we talk about our mission every time it happens.
Right.
We talk about what role does the ED need to serve? Are these still the 3 right components?
Yeah.
And we get to reorganize plates, because as you stay on for multiple time, you pick up duties and you grab things here, and that transitions forces us to reorganize that. And the same way with our staff even. So we'll have, we ask staff to stay from 2 to 6 years. We hire usually right out of college. And which for millennials like us, I mean, it's typical to stay in a job roughly 1.5 to 3 years.
Exactly, 18 months is the average,
yeah. And so what we do is then we ask for that time period. We're very upfront about it. And then we have a no surprises culture. And so what that means is we essentially know when they're going to leave. So I can tell you that Caitlin's going to leave in June. I can tell you that Irene's going to leave in August. And that's almost a year away. And what that does is that allows us to plan for those transitions and build the pipeline that we need to. And it also helps us help them find jobs.
Right.
And so they can get the professional development, the coaching. They don't have to hide around for interviews, as they go about.
Right.
And it ends up working out really well. And they end up staying on as donors. They end up staying to volunteer at future events. And so it's been a very successful sort of culture and management style for us.
And that's a great way to manage your organizational history, too, to have those people. I mean, it wouldn't be unusual to pick up the phone and say, hey, do you still happen to have this file with you?
Yeah, we do that all the time.
Sort of thing. Whereas I think organizations that are kind of more secretive about that, you do lose your organizational history a lot.
Yeah, that institutional knowledge has been crucial.
It's a wonderful HR model.
Yeah,
it really is
I'd
an
agree.
excellent model. One of the things I think is true in many nonprofits, because they do tend to have fewer staff, paid staff, is that you really get to be a generalist. So, one of the things that's challenging, I think, early in career development is if I join an organization of substantial size, I'm probably going to have a very small area that I'm responsible for. Whereas nonprofits, even when they're huge in terms of mission and clients that they work with, they still tend to be very flat.
Yeah.
They're not real hierarchical. And so you get to be this generalist. And as you've talked about, you pick up something new, and you all of a sudden you leave with this wealth of experience that you wouldn't have if you'd spent that same period of time in a for-profit.
Yeah.
I obviously have a nonprofit bias. But I think in terms of your career development, it's a wonderful way to really explore some of that.
Yeah, I'd absolutely agree with that. And we ask all our staff to read our financial documents with that, because that becomes beneficial for, personal finances when you're sitting on boards, other roles that you might take on. So no matter where they are in the organization, they can still read a budget, they can still, analyze an income statement, that type of stuff.
Exactly.
So those have been skills that maybe people who didn't have a business major can accrue.
Right.
And then one person I talked to, I've sought out mentors, and I would highly recommend you to seek out mentors if you can. And his name's Ron, and he retired when he was 40 and did very well in his career. But what he talks about when he and I sat down was that, a lot of his friends and his colleagues at the time were working up the job scale and kind of working up the pay grades and kind of moving up the organization like this. They ended up flattening out over time. And what he did was, as you just spoke about, built his capabilities. And so his curve was more like this, and then he just kept going up afterwards. And he's not working, and his colleagues are. But it's a very strong argument for building your capabilities. And so, and what's nice about the nonprofit is if it's something you're passionate about, so you want to go to work every day, and it provides you the opportunity to explore. And we always have more to do than there's people to do it. And so if you want to take on a project, for instance, I'm really interested in expansion and how we can grow into new states. And that's not necessarily within my programmatic realm. I get to go and explore there and have fun and do it. We have a new fellow who's in, like a fellowship, not a young lad.
A nice young fellow.
But she is actually she's really interested in grant writing. And so while that's not necessarily within her direct job description, she's excited about doing it. She graduated in May, and this is something that she wants to build her skill set in. And so we'll welcome extra grant writers, and it's been a really great symbiotic relationship.
And I'm not saying that happens absolutely in every nonprofit. There are some nonprofits that will be more hierarchical and sort of a more controlled center. And there's certainly for-profits that are looser in terms of their boundaries. But as an overall culture, I think there is a difference. I want to take you way back to a statement you made. It's kind of in passing, but that your funding is diversified. Talk about that. What does that mean?
I love our funding model. So many times you see nonprofits that budget zero sum, so as soon as their fiscal year ends, boom, you got to raise your entire budget again that year. You can base whatever you have on reserves, but a lot of times that's not a lot. And we're really fortunate where we have an earned income component, and so we actually won the Social Entrepreneur Cup in 2008. And basically what it is about 2/3, just about, of our revenue comes from fee-for-service components. So students pay to go on our trips. And it's a subsidized rate, so it still doesn't cover the entire cost. But what it does is it allows us to serve affluent communities. So say in our high school programs, I was just on a bus out of Wayzata, and we worked out of Minnetonka and Chanhassen, which are really great communities and fun students who still need leadership development, and so it still serves our mission. But also allows us to go to inner city St. Paul or do our trips out of the Delta in Mississippi and very poor rural areas. And so it provides that balanced component. And so that's roughly 2/3 of our overall budget. And then the other 1/3 is fundraised. And from that, about half comes from individuals, which we're trying to grow. It's more sustainable. You can plan better around it. And then the other portions are built around foundations, corporations, and then events.
So there's actually 8 ways that nonprofits can get revenue. So your organization does fundraising, and then you have a fee for service. So the same if I was a member of the Y, I pay my fee as a member of the Y. And then you said, kind of in passing, corporate. So you can get corporate dollars, which were really in 3 kinds. You can get money. You can get in-kind services, so they might provide you the bus, a bus company, or the gas or something. But then also volunteers. Now, are you at a point where you have volunteers in your office working with you? Okay. And your board has probably lots of corporate people on it, I would think. For instance, Wells Fargo is the largest donor of volunteers to the Junior Achievement Program. So you could have volunteers through corporations. Individuals could write a check, whether it's through a fundraiser or not. Grants, huge. You could set up a for-profit within your nonprofit. Do you sell your sweatshirts, your T-shirts?
We do, merch.
Yes. And so, for instance, at St. Thomas, which is a nonprofit, we do summer conference housing, which is run as a for-profit, an auxiliary program. to bring in revenue to the university. And then many organizations are now doing investments. Are you at a point where you can start to invest any of your funds?
Nothing more than a money market account.
Okay,
We haven't
okay,
gone
well,
beyond
even
that.
to the point that you're at that is
Yeah, we
is
dabbled.
ahead. And I think I've forgotten one now, because as I'm counting, I only have 7. But there are 8. Oh, taxes, tax dollars. And some organizations say we don't want to take any kind of tax dollars because they come with restrictions. But many times it's very useful. And so, for instance, if somehow you're connected with an education component, you might be able to get some tax dollars that way, that sort of thing. And ideally, nonprofits want to use some combination of these, because you could lose a funding source very quickly. The last non-higher ed nonprofit that I worked in DC, we were looking at educational reform. How do we keep kids from dropping out of high school? And most of our funding came from the Department of Labor. I don't know, lots of money. I forget now what it is. But Department of Labor had funded us for 7 years, because they said we affected the labor, kids stayed in school, they were more marketable, or more employable. And after 7 years, DOL, Department of Labor, cut our funds. And I remember our executive director calling us into our little conference room. There were about 20 of us on the staff. And he said, does anybody have any ideas? Oh, it was $1.7 million. Does anybody have any ideas? And it's like, what 1.7 million is? Do we have like a really big bake sale? I don't know how we come up with that kind of
It's a
money.
lot of brownies.
But we weren't diversified really at all. And we limped along for a while, and then the organization closed because we weren't diversified. So was that a struggle to say we're going to charge people to go on the...
That's how it started.
Oh, okay.
So when it was a student group at the U, that's the only way they could get it out. Because
Okay.
that was, that's what
Everybody's got to pay their own way.
Yeah. How are you
Okay.
going to raise the money? Who's going to manage it?
Okay.
That was part of the glimmerfree of questions that they were asked.
Interesting. The panel we had the other day, the folks from Bridging were here, and they distribute furniture and household goods to folks living in poverty and who are starting to get their feet together or under them about housing. And they now have a fee to use Bridging, which they didn't used to have, although it's charged back to the agency that refers them. But that was quite a dilemma. That was quite a dilemma for them. Of we know that these are people living in poverty. How do we charge them? That sort of thing.
Look at Habitat houses.
Right.
It's the same thing. Those are zero. You have to pay for the house,
Right.
but it's zero interest loans, and you have to put in so many work hours, and so they do have a component to that. So it's not just free stuff. It's earned.
Right. And psychologically, there seems to be some benefits to that. I have more ownership then in the neighborhood and that sort of thing. I want to shift gears a little bit.
Yeah.
So you're dressed very lovely.
Yeah. Thank you.
tonight.
Thank you.
Very nice. Green's a good color for you.
Appreciate that.
And is this what you'd wear to work most days?
Oh gosh, yeah. So my dress style is all over the place. So I dress for the day. If I've gone to work in shorts, athletic shorts, and a t-shirt, sweatpants are pretty common. Flip-flops on flip-flop day.
You don't get to do flip-flops every day?
I sneak it in every now and then. You yelled at sometimes. But then, if I'm going to a meeting with people from corporate, I'll dress to the occasion, or if I'm going to an event that night. But yeah, this is very common apparel.
Okay.
Jeans are almost daily for most of the staff. We're a big t-shirt organization, so everybody's almost always in a t-shirt.
In some sort of t-shirt. How many ties do you own?
I have a lot of ties, a fair amount of ties. My problem is I don't know how to match them to anything, so I actually never wear a tie, even though I have plenty to choose from.
Maybe you could get like little animal symbols on them.
Yeah, I
that
need
goes with
something
this
just
shirt.
to hook them up, but I don't know.
What about suits?
Suits, I have a few suits, yep. Probably, 3 or 4 that I've just developed over time that still fit. Some look like I'm walking through a flood, so I don't wear those as often.
That growth spurt
Yeah,
that happens, yeah.
bit. So, but yeah, a few suits and kind of thin, so they're tailored, so they look pretty sharp,
Good,
right?
good.
Yeah, yeah.
Good.
So.
And the reason I'm asking, it's not, I'm wondering all about his personal life, but maybe we'll get to more of that, is the cost of working in nonprofits does tend to be lower. If you were doing the same kind of work, development, outreach, client satisfaction, growth management, in a corporation, you'd be looking at wearing your suit every day.
Sure. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Multiple suits, multiple slacks, more dress shirts. Yeah, I'd have to buff up my collection.
Of the 5 work days last week, where'd you have lunch?
I brought lunch for 4 of them. Nope, 3 of them. I went home for lunch for 1, and then went to Chipotle for the other.
Ah,
You know,
okay.
We frequent Chipotle a lot.
Oh, are you close by a Chipotle over there?
Moderately,
Oh, okay,
close enough
okay.
where
That
we can get over
helps
there.
out.
Yeah.
So there's not a lot of expensive lunches you're
Oh,
eating.
no. Yeah. No.
You're eating at work for about the same cost as you'd eat at home.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Exactly the same cost.
And again,
Leftovers.
that's very different than corporate. The research for folks in for-profits say you go out to lunch an average of 3 times a week where you're spending more than $8 for lunch. And you're certainly eating probably for less than $8 a
Correct,
lunch.
Yeah. Chipotle is like $8.76 because I get the chips.
Ah, see those chips put you
Yeah, they put
over
me
the
over.
top. And what kind of automobile are you driving?
2004 Honda Accord.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah,
nice.
yeah. It's 137,000 miles, and she runs like a dream.
Mine's at 145, and
All
it's
right.
getting a little rough.
All
I
right,
have
all
to
right.
put
So
some
I got a
money
few
into
miles
it.
left.
Yeah. Do you think if you were going into a bank to work every day, you'd driving in that same car?
No, it would probably be a different vehicle.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think there are different expectations that not only your work environment puts on, but that you put on yourself. So, I mean, I'm making a fair amount of money, and I get by just fine. I just bought a house, and so so enough to buy a pretty decent house in a nice neighborhood. But I get to prioritize where that money goes, and I care less about, I guess, overall the view of what that is than I might if I were in corporate.
Yeah. I think there is a notion in corporate that that you purchase to demonstrate your success within the organization,
yeah,
that it becomes something the company's almost proud of. They don't want you driving around in some, something that's kind of falling apart because it's not a good representation of what they are.
Yeah.
And it becomes sort of some norms about what you talk about and that sort of thing. So there's some real differences in that.
Yeah, I mean, there's hardly any kind of keeping up with the Joneses that I found, even like internally within our nonprofit or between. Yeah, we'll ask about the utility more than the actual
exactly.
cost. Yeah, but how many bins can you move? Is more the question.
Exactly. Well, and there's almost kind of like this badge of honor, particularly with your car.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
what do you mean you're turning in? You haven't hit 200,000 yet. There's something about that.
Yeah,
And so you feel really like a fish out of water if that's not aligned with your values. I mean, if that's not a comfortable setting for you, you're not going to find a lot of support for necessary purchasing big or that sort of thing. Now, again, we're talking generalities, but certainly with your organization.
Oh yeah, that's definitely the case. And somebody bought a new car because he needed one.
Right.
And so we went out and
It was
celebrated. It
great,
looks great. It keeps it
exactly.
clean. So we kind of actually goad him a little bit for keeping it so clean. It's always so nice in there. But then we have another employee who actually we just hired as an executive director, and I mean, her car is 19 years old. Her ski rack is rusted on the top, and so she can't even take it off. And so
Yeah.
we have conversations around this.
That's great. How many weeks of vacation do you get?
Our vacation's set up a little weird. So we don't take any holidays. So you're set to work every weekday when the year starts.
Okay.
Right? And you get 27 days of vacation, and you pick when you want to take it off. So if I want to work Memorial Day, I'm going to come in and work Memorial Day. If I want to take all my vacation in December, I'll take all my vacation in December. And so that's the way we do it. We also do it where if you go on one of our programs, so we do overnight programs like I was sharing earlier, or if you go on overnight programs, you get that day back. So for instance, I was just on one over the weekend, and I got 2 extra days of vacation. So it's almost never just 27 days.
Okay,
And
okay.
you can take them whenever you want. I can wake up in the morning and say, I'm not feeling it, and I'll shoot a quick text over, and I'll stay in bed. As long as, there aren't,
Right. You couldn't do that for
if
no
there are
reason.
specific meetings or
things
whatever,
are demanding, right,
But we have the freedom to work from home. Say if you just want to churn out a project, I'll stay at home and work it through. If I need to run to the bank, if I need to get my oil changed, if I need to do whatever, I just leave.
You do that.
Nobody checks on me. Same with the rest of the staff, and then I just come back. We more operate and get your work done.
Right.
Than
Seat
than
time.
when you do it. Exactly.
Interesting.
And we work with students a lot, and they're staying up late at night, and we need to be on Facebook because that's where our business is. And so, on Facebook, we're on Twitter all day.
Interesting. Well, and I like that idea. You don't have holidays because I celebrate different holidays than other people.
Yeah.
And so, great. I get Easter. Easter, okay, is Sunday, but I get Christmas off. But I'm not celebrating Christmas necessarily.
Yeah, if you're celebrating Eid, if you're celebrating
Exactly.
the Jewish holidays in
Right.
September, yeah.
Very interesting idea. If tomorrow, typically I say if tomorrow you walked in, you were in charge, but you are in charge. If tomorrow, well, no, if tomorrow. What's the biggest challenge facing your organization?
I would say it's determining where to invest our resources.
Okay.
And so I was obtaining resources and then determining where to invest them. And so
Okay.
we do a fine job meeting our budget. We've had a surplus every year. Actually, this last fiscal year was the first time we had a deficit, which we have plenty in reserve. So we're not
You're
closing our
okay,
doors
yeah.
or anything. Yeah. So we're very healthy in terms of finances. But I would say it's obtaining the resources that we need above and beyond to then grow and flourish.
Okay.
So in nonprofits, you don't make profit, you don't report to stakeholders or shareholders, you still have stakeholders. But you can get a surplus and infuse it back into the organization, and so that's what we've been able to do, and we made some really great HR choices. We hired a couple fellows that I mentioned, that's
Okay.
new for us, to help build that capacity to do new programs, but it's definitely obtaining the extra resources and then determining where to best leverage those and finding out where your potential bottlenecks are
Right.
to alleviate them.
How will you know when you've grown enough?
That's a good question. We ask ourselves that every year. Do we want to grow?
Right.
Is the question we start with, and even though we're in the midst of a 5-year expansion plan, it's okay. If for some reason it doesn't work for the organization, we don't want to do it just to do it. And so we ask, do we want to grow? And I think it's when we feel we're not adding value in a specific area. So even, we might be in a geographic area where it's not as strong anymore, or we're not getting the reciprocation necessarily, or the buy-in, and so then we'll have some attrition. But when we're not adding value, or if we're unable to sustain a quality product, right? So if we're not putting out a good pay it forward to, or a strong experience,
Okay.
leadership experience for students, then I think that we need to not be
You
there.
need to, okay,
Yep.
pull it back in.
Yep.
And my last question for you is, what comes next in your career adventures?
Barb. I don't wanna.
I don't want to figure that out.
Yeah, I have no idea. So I set goals every year for myself, and my goals this year are to determine 3 to 5 potential career options.
Okay.
And then next year, I'll narrow it down and start developing professionally in whichever ones that I choose. And then my last year, then I can pick and actually do the informational interviews and all that stuff. I don't know in what realm. I think there are a ton of opportunities, whether it's still in the nonprofit sector, whether it's moving to a business area, or within business. I don't think I'd start my own organization. I could move into the public sector and education. That's potential. So the problem is there are too many options, I think, at this point, and I would argue that's a lot for the audience too.
Yeah, well, and I feel the same way.
Yeah.
My husband and I know where we're going to live. We bought some land in Mexico. We know we're going there.
Nice.
What we're going to do, we don't know.
Yeah,
And it's kind of
yeah.
exciting. My dad, when he was 75, started a new business.
That's awesome.
And so that's the model I've always grown up with, is that it's always something new. So
Yeah.
it is kind of exciting, like, yeah, I can up and do something different.
Well, one thing that was helpful for me is in between my 2 years of teaching, I did an internship in a policy organization because I thought I wanted to go into policy
right.
and maybe work in government in that realm or for an educational policy organization. And I hated it. I mean, I was sitting in a cube. I would wait to go to the bathroom at work so I wouldn't have to work as long. It was terrible. And so what was nice about it, though, is I got to cross something off. I got to close the
Right.
door,
You
and
knew
it
that
narrowed my
wasn't it.
options.
Yeah.
And that probably saved me 2 years of grad school and something that I wouldn't have liked anyway.
Right,
So
right.
that was really helpful for me.
Yeah, almost finding out what you don't want to do is
Yeah.
important. Exactly. And sometimes we don't know. I mean, our imagination about those or our fantasies about those may not be reality. We have to
Yeah.
go try it out.
For sure.
Interesting. What else should I have asked you that I didn't?
Gosh. I don't know. I guess the one thing I would say around what type of sector to go into after graduating is where your values are, and I think there are benefits to each. And I don't think there's a right answer. So for me, I found that it was more important for me to enjoy going to work, to be energized about what I'm doing, and the financial side of things wasn't that important. I still wanted to get by, and I still wanted to be comfortable.
Right.
Like, I have a healthy savings. Like I said, just bought a house and that type of stuff. And so that's still important to me. But but enjoying what I'm doing and being happy would
Right,
trump that,
trump
right?
that, right.
And so, but for many of my friends, that they want to be able to have the lake cabin, they want to provide for their family, they want the different toys, they want the great stuff,
Right.
which is, they want the
Great.
comfortable lifestyle, and that's
Exactly.
fantastic. And so, and that's a different way to get it, and
Right.
and it's a different life choice. And so I think just understanding what you need or what I need is important.
Well, and I know for myself, I got on an early career path, and I never stopped to ask those value questions. Like, what is it I really value in terms of how I want to use my talents, my gifts, what's important for me? I just went out and started doing what,
Yeah.
I thought you grew up to do.
And it changes over time, right?
It
I mean,
does.
it's important
It
to keep
absolutely
asking them
does.
because it shifts. Like,
It
it's,
absolutely
mine have
does.
probably shifted 2, maybe 3 times since college.
Yeah.
And it wasn't that long ago.
Right, right. Yeah. Questions from all of you. You've got a near to your age expert in life experiences in nonprofits. What questions do you have for Josh?
I'll seriously answer anything. I'll shoot you straight. Do it, Brady. Do it. I'm just messing with you.
Yes.
Is there an expectation for a college degree for the employee?
Yeah, I would say so. I'd say that still exists. So in our job descriptions, we're actually set up like a choose your own adventure, which are pretty cool. And we do ask for a college degree for most of our positions that are over a year commitment. Yeah, because for me, and actually a specific, like the degree matters less on what it's in. So we have a physics major, we have a finance major, we have a marketing that don't work within their realms. We have, gosh, what was it? It was like Spanish Lit or something. I'm a mass comm major. It matters less what the degree is in, but some are better than others. But that you have a degree. So it demonstrates maturity, ability to finish a task, those types of things. So a business degree actually helps immensely in your ability to navigate nonprofit situations. I've run into a couple nonprofits, actually one we're connected to, where it's someone with a great heart, a lot of passion, but no idea how to balance books, no idea how to do any sort of long-term planning of any kind. And those types of skills are super valuable in that realm. Good question.
I think the degree thing will continue to become more and more demanding. We were talking about Listening House earlier. It's a homeless shelter in St. Paul, and all of their staff, so here they are dealing with homeless people, all of their staff are required to have at least a master's degree. So the degree does matter. Some of it is to demonstrate that you can manage those things you said, but some of it is that you need some academic rigor in certain areas to help really an organization function. Good question. What else do you want to know? Nonprofit questions? Who's an accounting major out here? Accounting majors? Finance majors? Who's graduating? Are you graduating this year? What year are you? Junior. Are you graduating this year?
Nice.
So this is your ultimate final exam question. Might be a little bit easier if you were an accounting major, and no help from the audience. What are the two things, and we'll see how close you're listening, what are the two things that for-profits do with their profits? Yes. Oh, no. What do for-profit, so corporations, what do they do when they have profit at the end of the year? Where's that profit go? Anybody who's newer to accounting know this? Mike. Yes, so retained earnings back into the company, and what's the other? Pay dividends to their shareholders or owners, even if they're privately held. So for nonprofits, they still want a profit. This is what's surprising to so many people. But they only have basically retained earnings. They put back into the company. I'll frequently have students come to me and say, I want to work for this organization or volunteer for this organization. you know, it's my uncle's business, but they're not making any money yet, so that's okay, right? And it's like, no, that's not how you define what a nonprofit is. It's what they do with their funds. So, and you know, I'll be honest, I was in the midst of getting a PhD in business and took my first job where I knowingly was entering a nonprofit, and I didn't really know what that meant.
Yeah.
Because we don't talk about it in business as if it's just some, I don't know, maybe the fairies and the angels do nonprofit stuff. I mean, not business people. And yet, look at that industry and what our economy counts on out of that, and what our citizenry counts on. We need to have brilliant minds in there working those nonprofits.
Well, and have you seen that the TED Talk by Dan Pilato?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh gosh, it's so good.
You will actually see it in your third
Okay.
class, so yes. Raises some very provocative questions, I think, and really makes you think.
We're holding up the sector.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Why is it that, this is a Coke product, I think. I called upon Dasani's the other day as an example. Why is it we allow Coke to spend $1 gazillion advertising, and yet if a nonprofit wants to go out and spend $5,000 on a fundraiser to make $40,000, we say, well, that $5,000 should be going to work with your client,
For sure.
not as part of your overhead. So it's real interesting. Yeah, real interesting questions and sort of our mindset about all of that. One last question. Did you know there's a rule about asking questions? We have to allow at least 20 seconds of silence.
Oh yeah, you have to. Same with facilitating activity.
Yeah, yeah, because I know the question already, so then you have to like, oh, wait, I think that was a question, I better go back and listen, and so, questions?
Nice.
Oh.
Yeah, great question. So we're in downtown Minneapolis, almost. we're actually really close to downtown. And we used to be in this mansion called the Hinkle-Murphy Mansion, and it was super fun, but it was kind of like being in the catacombs because we were down in the basement. And so we just moved across the way. We got to design our own office space. It's a big open space. Everybody has their own desk now, which is new. We used to share tables. And we have a loft in it, and so we climb up on the ladder, and we have some bean bags, some carpeted area. You can take a nap on the futon that's up there. We're next to Finnegan's Beer, a nonprofit beer company. We share a door right in there, so if you're lagging in the afternoon, you can go
You
over
share a door?
Yeah, it's back and forth. We each have a key.
There are definite benefits, I think.
You can go into their kegerator and grab a brew. We're next to a nonprofit coffee shop, and so we can go in there and support them while getting your fix. So we have a pretty sweet office space, I would say.
Wow,
Yeah, it's
very cool.
It's nifty.
Finnegan's is interesting. So this beer company decides they're going to be a nonprofit. It makes, and we'll talk about this some in class 3, but it makes me begin to wonder, why aren't we all nonprofits? Like, from a moral point of view, should we have shareholders?
Yeah, it shifts corporate responsibility to
Yes,
bringing the mission. Yeah.
exactly. So, just to keep you on the edge of your seats for upcoming classes. If you will, question?
No,
Another
good
question?
question.
Oh, good
That's
question.
nice word.
Yeah, I haven't been to your new office location.
Yeah, so check it out.
I
It's
need
really
to.
nice.
I'd go to the coffee shop route, but
Yeah,
maybe.
that's fair. Let's come
yeah.
back and after you have your brew.
Yeah, exactly. Anything else? Well, if you will join me in thanking
Thanks, everybody.
Josh. Thank you
Yeah,
so
thanks, Barb.
much. Great. And I will see all of you at your third classes. I'll be at all the third classes, and walk home safely.
Can I give a quick plug?
Yes, please do.
Yeah, there's a Pay It Forward tour at UST. They fill it fast, 3 buses
Yes.
over spring break. You get many, many hours of service. I know you need that for your BUSN200 course. And it's probably going to be some of the best service you'll ever do in a pretty solid